I'm sitting in for Munson Steve. My co-host is Kevin Hooks. Today we have a special guest joining us tonight, seated at the table. We're talking politics. We're talking politics to a seat that was held by the now late John Lewis for over 33 years, District 5 in Georgia. Joining us today is Ms. Angela Stanton-King, who is running in this race to take her seat in Washington. What makes this a special conversation, she has decided to run on the platform as a Republican. How are you doing this evening, Ms. King?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Outstanding, outstanding. So tell us what made you decide to throw your hat in the ring to get into politics of all things?
I mean, for me, really, it's not about politics, it's personal. I could just take certain situations from different times in my life and apply it to how our politics are rolling out right now. And I just didn't really see a lot of hope for people like me. And I didn't see anybody really being a voice for people like me. So many times they play politics and put politics over the people, where I said, you know what, if they can't get it right, I'm just gonna throw my hat in the ring, send me in, I'll straighten them up. Let's really make a difference. I mean, and it was important for me to run as a Republican because I've been paying attention and I've been hearing, a lot of us say, hey, there's no voice for us on that side. Nobody really represents us. And I thought that we have to have representation on both sides. When it comes to white people and in politics, they can be Republican, Democrat, Libertarian. They don't get called snowouts or coons. But if you're Black, then they just assume that we all have to be Democrat. I mean, we can't all be Democrat. We need to be everywhere, and we need to have a seat at every table. So it was important for me to be a voice for us on the Republican side, and I can fight for us on that side the same way I can fight for us on the Democrat side.
That's a good answer. Kevin?
Yeah, it's interesting. Full disclosure, I happen to be a registered Republican as well. So I think that it's important for us to approach it from that very perspective. And, but at the same time, I also was the CEO of the largest urban league in the country. So been on the civil rights platform, spent some time with John Lewis during his book signing when he released his book. And so I appreciate your answer about the importance of voice on both sides. But I really want to talk to you about the things that I've experienced as well by being willing to admit that I'm a Republican, by saying just because I'm a Republican doesn't mean that I support racists. It doesn't mean that I support racist agendas. It doesn't mean that I support racism in general. And I certainly am aware of the systemic, discrepancies that we face on a regular basis. And so being on either side doesn't mean that we've given up our understanding of what it is to be Black. Can you talk about some of the reasoning behind why you can still bring all your authentic self to the other side of the aisle?
I mean, you don't erase my Blackness because of my morals, right? I'm on the Republican side because there are some things on the Democrat side that I don't necessarily agree with, and I thought that it was time to walk away from for me. For me personally, I'm totally against, abortion, most certainly late-term abortion. I mean, it's a baby. I mean, and I know that, Planned Parenthood has admitted by their own mouths, of their racist and bigot ties. I mean, we know that this is an organization that has targeted Black life. Not only have they targeted Black life, but they've put all of their abortion clinics in our neighborhoods. And when you go to the rich white neighborhoods, they get fertility clinics, but we get abortion clinics. And every time you hear someone talk about abortion, somehow it's tied to women of color. And so I know that for us, when we're talking about being an oppressed minority, if we want to not be in minority, then we need to grow our numbers, and we need to stop aborting our votes, and we need to stop aborting our own army. We need to reevaluate how we value life, how we look at life. When a woman becomes pregnant, the first thing to come out shouldn't be go get an abortion. I think that there are other options. We should be fighting to keep families together. We should be fighting to keep men in the home, and we should be fighting to keep children born alive. I also don't agree with, this hypersexualized society that we're living in right now. I don't agree with children being tied to any type of sexual movement. I mean, let's just be honest. People say, hey, wait a minute. Oh, you're homophobic or you're just a Christian. No, I'm not against, adults having their rights to do whatever they want to do. But when I see a presidential candidate sit up on the stage and say that an 8-year-old child should be able to have a sex change, then that's very alarming to me, because I'm someone that was violated sexually at a very young age. I don't think that our children should be participating in anything sexual, whether it's homosexual, whether it's heterosexual, whether it's bisexual, asexual, transsexual. I just think prepubescent children should just be focused on learning and not so much as sex. So I think that something definitely needs to be done with the way that they are pushing this movement. Again, like I said, not against any adults, but definitely want to protect the innocence of children. Outside of that, I strongly believe, because I come from a family where just about everyone's Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole entire life, and I've seen, some of these things that are generational and generational poverty, meaning that the grandmother, she has a baby early and then gets on Section 8, and then that baby has a baby early, and the cycle continues. And I know that when it comes to a lot of welfare benefits, because I've received welfare myself, I've been a convicted felon, a single mom, I've gone through all of the systems, but they'll say, hey, we'll give you welfare, we'll give you food stamps every month, but you can only make a certain amount of money. So that kind of prevents you from going forward, or keeps you kind of stuck, so to speak, if you're a single mom worried about how you're going to take care of your kids. I've also been in a situation where they give you Section 8 and they come in the house with a flashlight and they're looking in the closet and all up under the beds because they want to make sure that the father is not in the home. So I think that some of those policies has led to our family separation. So I think that we need to kind of, try to do something different, because I know that the definition of insanity is to continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And I think that in Atlanta, we've been Democrat for almost 140 years. And I don't think that having the R behind my name means that I'm a sellout or I don't care or I'm against Black life. No, I actually am for Black life. I'm all about Black life. And I just want to see a real change. And I just think that we've got to go about something different this go around if we want to see change.
No, I appreciate that answer. There's a lot to unpack. So let's break it down. Number one, I personally believe gender identity and sexuality are two separate things. And I do believe that gender identity isn't a choice. I think that, I appreciate the idea that adults need to be able to, it's important that they make their own choices, and that we're dealing with children, that it's incumbent upon adults to get involved. And so I hear you when you say that adults have the right to make their own choice and that children really need to have the involvement of adults. But I also think that the adults that need to be involved are the individual parents. And so when you hear people push back on your ideas, one of the things I really would like to hear you talk about is not only your position on individuals being able to make individual choices for their children, but also hear about, what are some things on the Republican agenda that you completely disagree with? When I approach people about why I registered as a Republican, I make it known that I disagree with things on the Democratic platform, as well as the Republican platform, as well as the independent platform. And so I make it a point to say that I'm being educated and I use that to make my decision as the driver and not the R and the D. So,
well, for one thing, we got to back up a little bit when we talk about we need to leave those decisions to the parents. That's very dangerous when you say leave those decisions to the individual parents, because Joe Biden said he would change the law, and the law of the land affects us all. We all have to abide by those laws. So when I am a mother, and I am a mother of a gay male, someone who was a part of that community, was also raised by a gay aunt, love them very much. But when I am a mother, and if I have an 8-year-old son in my house and he's telling me that he believes he's a girl, and I'm telling him, no, son, you're a boy. If you like girls' things, that's different, but you're a male. And then he goes to school and tells his teacher, my mom won't let me be a girl. The next thing you know, those teachers are held bystanders. They have to make a report. And then the next thing you know, DFAX is in your home. So we need to be very careful with the laws that we are supporting when we're talking about changing laws, because those laws don't just impact the parents that's okay with it. It impacts us all. I'm not here on this platform to necessarily discuss what I disagree with about the Republican Party. I'm a new member of the Republican Party. What I do agree with them is that they understand that they need new faces and they understand that they need diversity. I appreciate the fact that they have gotten behind me and supported me 100% because they believe in a candidate like me. So I think that all parties have the ability to change. I don't believe that the Democrat things that I spoke of today were the Democrat things 10 years ago. I think that parties change and evolve over time. So where I am right now, I stand with the Republican Party because of their policies.
But not all.
You want to speak on some policies that you don't agree with? Because it seems like you're trying to force me to say something.
No, I'm just asking a question. Do you agree 100%?
I agree with the Republican policies. I agree with the fact that we don't need to fund abortion. I agree with the fact that we need to maintain our Second Amendment rights. I agree with the fact that we need to put the American people first. I agree with the fact that we need to have freedom of speech. I agree with the fact that we need to have school choice. So when we're talking about things that are on the ballot right now, I agree with the Republican Party.
So yes.
So you kind of talked a little bit about you was touching on LGBTQ in our communities and our families. So what's your views? Is that one of the topics that you will be discussing if making it to Washington? What is your view?
And I wanna be clear, because it's like when you say LGBTQ, people think that you're against, adults that has a sexual preference. My issue is with LGBTQ plus, because for one, what does the plus represent? And then my issue is with LGBTQ plus youth. Now, when you talk about LGBTQ and we talk about what they represent, we say that the L is a lesbian. We know what a lesbian is. It's a woman that prefers to have sex with women. We know that a bisexual person is a person that likes to have sex with men and women. We know that a gay person is a male that likes to have sex with males. So when we begin to talking about youth, right, and having them represent those letters, then they're representing sexual choices and sexual preferences. When you have a presidential candidate that goes on stage and relates that to an 8-year-old child, I'm saying that it is a dangerous atmosphere and tone that we are creating when we are tying sex to prepubescent children.
Yes, we agree with that.
Right, so that's the issue. I think that we should have laws to protect the innocence of children. We should not be pushing gender identity in school as young as preschool. I mean, there is no reason why a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old should be worried about whether or not they are a boy or a girl.
There's a difference between preference and behavior. So
well, we're talking about children. Explain to me why a child should have a preference.
Well, I didn't decide to be heterosexual. It just
okay, and me either. Nobody had to teach you that. So right, nobody had to teach my son to be gay. I mean, he grew up and grew into the man that he was going to be. These children are going to grow up and make their preferences and make their choices over time as they mature. It's nothing that needs to be forced or pushed on them, especially when we're talking about preschoolers and kindergarten.
I understand that. We agree. So my point, so we are certainly in lockstep with that. My only point was when you define the L, the G, and the B, when you defined it, we were talking in context of the definition as an adult. And then we entered into the context of how it impacts children. So
but how do we take sexual preferences and tie them to children?
That wasn't a question.
The reason I brought it up, and again, I think it doesn't have to be contentious because we agree. My only point is that there is an actual difference between preference and behavior, and that point of differentiation is the point where I think it's important for us to really start to point out why policy matters in that direction.
So what type of behaviors though, when you say behaviors, are you talking about a child displaying sexual behaviors? What do you mean when you say behaviors?
No, I'm just saying that there's an attraction that's preferential and it doesn't necessarily impact, you make the choice of how you behave. So for example, if I am an adult male and I have an attraction to men, that doesn't mean that I'm sexual with those men necessarily, right? And so even with a child.
So does that mean you're gay?
Well, that's not for me to decide, for the individual.
Okay, so again, remember we talking about children. So you've gone from an adult being attracted, sexually attracted to men, and now you're saying that children are being sexually attracted to each other. And I think that's where we get mixed up at.
But I didn't say that.
Okay, so we can move on.
No, this is our show. I don't want to move on. I want to answer
the question. The question that we were trying to get to.
It was your show, but we had to pay to be on your show.
I just want to be clear to the audience that there is a difference, and it's at that difference where we all have to, as people setting policy, make a choice. And I'm trying to understand and have you explain to the audience your position on that policy differentiation. That's all I was asking.
And I've explained several times that we need to protect the innocence of children, that we are creating a dangerous atmosphere when we begin to tie sex to children. The LGBTQ movement should be about adults.
And I'm saying we're not tying sex to children.
And that's what the question is
trying to. On Joe Biden's website, he has a whole section dedicated to LGBTQ plus youth. So don't tell me it's not being tied to children.
Ms. King, the question is for you. The question is not, what we're trying to ask is, I'm trying to ask you is, in general, the whole platform, what is your position on supporting the entire LGBTQ community?
I support LGBTQ adults. I do not support LGBTQ anything being tied to children. They're all sexual preferences and choices.
That's the question we was trying to ask.
And I said it 1,000 times. Okay.
You're right, because we were stuck on the children. We was trying to just ask you about the adult side.
Yeah, and I said in the very beginning, adults can make their own choices and their own decisions. I'm not against adults anything. That's their business.
Okay. So what is? Okay. A couple of things have transpired over the last week as far as in the 5th district. A lot of murder has been taking place. So are there anything that you, as far as the defunding the police, is that something on the agenda as far as how do we fix these problems in our community, especially in the 5th district?
We need to bring the community and the police together. Community policing is very important. I mean, I think that I'm from the 5th district. I grew up in zone 3. I grew up in Summer Hill. I know we don't want to defund the police. I mean, the people saying defund the police aren't going to be there when we need to call the police. My entire life, every friend that I've ever lost was not killed by a police officer. So we have crime in our neighborhoods, and we know that a lot of people that are in law enforcement, some of them are our friends and family, and the police officers save lives every single day. We need to make sure that we pay attention to that fact. But what we need to do is bring back police reform. Police reform is a part of criminal justice reform. Before a person ever has an encounter with a judge or ever receives a sentence, that first encounter starts with the police officer. So some of the things that I'd be interested in doing is holding more community events where the police officers are in the community, the people in the community know who they are, possibly having police officers patrol the areas that they live in, and then also bring back beat walking. I mean, I remember when I was younger, there were police officers that patrolled the neighborhoods. We knew them by first name. They knew us by first name. They knew our parents. So I think that if we begin there, that's a start. Have training sessions, right? We need to talk about interactions with the police. What happens when you're pulled over by a cop? You understand where I'm coming from? What's the best way to diffuse the situation? I think at the end of the day, we want everyone to return home. We want the person that has been, arrested to come back home. We want that police officer to come back home. We want the law to be dealt with in the courts, not on the scene. And that's what I support.
Black how do we address that? Does your reforms address that?
Can you say that again?
I said African Americans are 3 times more likely to die at the hands of a police officer. Did your reforms address that as well?
So that's something that need to be addressed. You know, I'm all for Black Lives Matter. I was on the scene at the FBI press conference, the only Black voice, and demanded that the officers that killed George Floyd be arrested. So Tim Scott wrote a police reform bill that the Democrats voted completely against. It banned chokeholds, it banned no-knock warrants, it talked about systemic racism. So just because we're Republicans don't mean that we don't support Black Lives Matter, the movement. We may not support the organization, but we definitely believe Black Lives Matter, which is another reason why we're voting for Black life to not be exterminated in the womb.
Yeah, Cory Booker was a partner on that piece of legislation. He's a Democrat. So
yeah, Cory Booker also voted against the First Step Act, so maybe he wishy-washy sometimes. I don't know. And he's also a prolific voice for Planned Parenthood. He also said he wanted to put an office in the White House strictly dedicated to making sure women had the right to abort their children. So, hey.
I mean, you just said the Scott's bill wasn't supported by Democrats. I'm just saying, Cory Booker and he wrote it together. That's all.
Okay, the Democrats voted against it. The president signed an executive order. Okay, Cory Booker is a Democrat, so.
I think it was good policy. I wish they would have supported it.
I wish they would have too, and we need to bring it back.
Yeah, I think Tim Scott has, under the circumstances, done a yeoman's effort in his position and the challenges that he faces, and I'm glad to have his voice on that side. But as we continue to talk about police reform, if you think, do you think that moving forward, there's an opportunity to partner with people on the other side of the aisle to get police reform through,
I partner with people on the other side of the aisle all the time. This is all the work that I've done prior to running for public office. This is my criminal justice reform is what I'm all about. My nonprofit organizations have been about pushing legislation and bringing both sides together. If you go down my page, you'll see plenty of pictures of me with Van Jones and other Democrats, because we know the First Step Act was bipartisan. And that's why I'm here today. Who has not refused to work with the other side is my opponent, Nikema Williams, which is why she will not show up for a debate. Her being dismissive of our community, because at the end of the day, we're both two Black women, right? And we should be able to work together to push our community forward. Regardless of what side we stand on politically, we should be able to bounce ideas off of each other, and regardless of who wins, be able to say, hey, that was a good idea you had. I would still like to work with you if this is what's best for our community. So bipartisan, politics are supposed to be bipartisan. They're not supposed to be partisan. So we've got, you see me doing the interview? So they have to, so at the end of the day, we should be partisan. This is what this is all about. We can't have politics that are bipartisan because we're just not going to all agree. But the thing about it is being able to agree to disagree. And like someone told me a long time ago, Republicans and Democrats, we're two wings on the same bird, but we balance each other out. You don't want to be too far left and you don't want to be too far right. And so we're all about diversity. That's what politics is about. All of us are not Democrat. We don't all agree with Democrat policies, but I don't disagree with all Democrat policies either. So we need to find that middle ground and come together.
So the latest survey shows that healthcare is the most important issue for the majority of Americans coming up for November 3rd. Can you talk about your position and thoughts around healthcare?
Yes, access and affordability is number one, making sure that we protect pre-existing health conditions. You understand where I'm coming from? I just don't believe that universal health care is for everyone. I think that there are people that have money and can afford to pay, and those are the people that should pay. I believe that everyone who is in need of health care absolutely should be covered, and we definitely have to protect those that have pre-existing conditions. So we don't vary too much. I just believe, why would we give the wealthy free health care when we know that medical professionals still have to be paid? We know that there are people that can't afford care that have to be taken care of. We should just make sure that we're providing for those that need it.
Yeah, this has been incredible. Can you tell the people how we can reach you? How do we, if we want to support your campaign, where can we go?
So Stanton-King for Congress, guys. Go take a look at my website. I'm an Atlanta native. I've been here just about my entire life, like I've said before. For me, politics is not about politics. It's is personal for me. I mean, I've experienced living in a low income area, having an Excel student, I faced school choice. I've experienced our criminal justice reform system. I've experienced this broken child support system that we need to restructure that tears apart more of our families than brings them together. I know about a lot of the corruption in the buddy system that happens in Atlanta, how the rich get richer, and then those of us that are trying to come up, somehow we're always struggling. I just think it's a changing of the guards that we're witnessing taking place. And it's just really time for the people that have been forgotten to have a chance to make their way to the top. So change is here. Angela Stanton-King for Congress. Visit my website, StantonKingForCongress.com. You guys can follow me on Instagram at @TheAngelaStanton or Twitter, @TheAngieStanton. Tigner, it was nice seeing you again. I remember seeing you a year ago at the RIDE conference when I was bringing jobs to Atlanta and hiring people right on the spot. Don't be afraid to let these people know that I've been working in the community for a long time. Thank you.
You have been working in the community. We appreciate you very much for joining Ms. Angela Stanton-King, running for the 5th congressional seat in Georgia. Election is November 3rd, so make sure if you're going to vote, let's get out and vote early. Make sure you take advantage of your civil active duty to go vote.
That's right.
Once again, thank you for coming on and let everyone know about your position in this election.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much. All right. Bye-bye. So you're tuned into A Seat at the Table. I am Tigner along with Kevin Hooks. How you doing this evening, man? You on mute, brother.
I'm good.
You're still on mute. There you go.
Are we off?
There you go. No, we're still live.
All right.
Yeah. So up next, we have the guru coming on.
Cool.
Our investment strategist.
I'm no guru. I'm just happy to serve the people. How you doing?
You have to be in this. I'll do it after this. All right.
Yeah.
What's up, brother?
Good. How you doing, man? It's been a long time since we chatted last. How you feeling?
Man, I'm just out here grinding, man. It's good to see you, man.
Likewise. It's good to see you too.
Hey, we got.
Listen, I need them Louboutins still. Whenever you get a moment.
Before we dive in, the market. How was the market today? The market closed down almost $100.
Yeah, but Tesla did good. The earnings were solid.
Yeah.
Things are going to be rocky until the election is over with. Until we have a clear-cut president and that we know when the stimulus is going to be passed, it's going to be rocky. If there's any uncertainty in the market, people don't like it, and people are really just going to sit on the sidelines in the interim. But Tesla's done well. Google is under a little bit of pressure because the antitrust stuff, but give it till March or April, I think we'll be back fine. And then a keynote that I want to also bring up for tonight is if we look at the last 12 big recessions, not to turn it political, but 10 of those recessions have come under Republican tenure, only 2 under Democratic. So I know some people are like, well, if Biden gets in, the tax plan is going to be horrendous. I know 50 endorsed Trump, 50, I love you, but you tripping. Come on, brother, move out of New York. So I'll go back to G Unit back to 2001, but come on, man. Anyway, but under Democratic leads, like I have some notes here, under Clinton, the market, the S&P 500 went up 210%. Nixon, it was -20. George W. Bush, -40. Obama did pretty well after he took over in office. So if Biden gets in, I think the first 4 or 5 months would be rough, but 2 years out, the market would do very well because historically it always has.
President Trump will be the first president in history to have a net negative in job creation at the end of his term if he loses. That's big, and that's a fact.
Yes.
And if we're just talking facts, it's important to point out the actual facts. We have an economy that's hemorrhaging not only jobs, but we're underperforming in every major category. I think the fundamentals are hit or miss, and I think that's important. So if we continue the same approach to policy, like your point is, and I think it's something I really want us to spend some time talking about, is the fact that the markets although that's a whole separate reality from our GDP and the economic performance indicators. But the fact of the matter is that, the uncertainty impacts negatively across every category that we manage.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's important to point out is just the uncertainty. And, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican, I don't care if you support Biden or support Trump. For us as business people, we want to know certainty because it allows us to plan and predict and make choices for the future.
Yes. And for everyone listening at home, I want to give you some homework. I want you to look at the last 6 presidents and look at what the GDP has been under each president. Because I want us to take the blood and crit mentality from Republican versus Democrat, and let's look at what the hardline stats are. GDP growth under Republicans, it tilts off very fast, and then it begins to taper off. And we talk a lot about risk mitigation and investing, but one big disaster like mismanaging COVID, taking away that team, those preventative measures really cost us dearly. It wasn't taken as serious. And I think even if, from a political standpoint, I think Trump missed a great opportunity to even make masks for his campaign to even help the people, because it's really become a thing across the Republican Party not to wear masks because you don't believe it. And people are still saying, I don't believe COVID is real, even though he has it or had it. Barron has it. Melania has it. It's like, this thing is not a day. We haven't shut down the world economy over a hoax. But your homework, I do want you to go research how the GDP does under the last 6 presidents. It's pretty insightful.
And let's talk about like sort of the hallmark of the Republican leadership when they highlight a president that they think was incredible, Ronald Reagan. We always like to wax poetic about how great his presidency was as it relates to the economy. And the facts really don't support that. I mean, that trickle down, sort of theory of economics was proven to be exactly disastrous as a result of Reaganomics. And I think it's important for us to point out and tell the truth so that we can make decisions that are based in truth. We had, horrible economic times. We had, especially as African Americans, our unemployment rates was extremely high. The inflation was out of control at the time, and it didn't really seem to trickle down when he had the big tax cut. And I think that's important to point out. And it's also important to point out that, when President Clinton came into office, there was a surplus for the first time in several decades. And as a result of that surplus, going into the next presidency, we were set to really have long-term growth and long-standing wealth creation. And yet we continue to look back on history, which is why I think that homework is important.
Yes.
And, with sort of rose-colored glasses. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, but we talk about the 6 presidents, sort of the hallmark of Republican, sort of economic plan is Ronald Reagan.
Very true. And I agree wholeheartedly. And then also Clinton had the benefit of coming into the big tech boom. So for some of us that are old enough to remember when AOL had the disk and everything, like Alta Vista and Compaq, like we began the technological wave, and he benefited greatly from that. And then
also the point is he didn't even try to find success until he lost control. The Democrats lost control of the economy. So then that balance is what created that pathway to success, which is another point I think is important for us to point out. It isn't when the Democrats have all power or the Republicans have all power that we have had success.
Yeah, and even going back to the tech part of regulation, some people think no regulation is amazing. That works for a year or two, and then everything falls apart. Too much regulation is bad. But there is a fine balance that you need of both, which gives stability. And then even from a presidential standpoint in dealing with other municipalities and other countries, we need a more diplomatic approach so we can get some of these things passed up. Because now we're getting to a place where America is the country that used to be great, and China is gaining steam, gaining traction, a lot more discipline in terms of their, like on a citizen level and also on a business level. We could be in trouble if we do not get control of our GDP and how we do things culturally over the next 20 years.
So talk about, you mentioned a little bit about the Google antitrust. There's a whole big movement toward these, extremely large corporations that are multinational, like Google, like Apple, like Facebook. What do you think the future looks like with regard to this antitrust pursuits?
It's tough because in the 90s, Microsoft truly had I'm a big Microsoft fan, big Gates fan from an entrepreneurial standpoint, but they truly had a monopoly. Google, they really have the best product. Like, so if you are classifying them from a search engine perspective, of course they have a monopoly. They have like 85 to 89% of market share, depending on how you slice it. Now, if you reframe them as a technology company, Apple has a search engine, Facebook does, Instagram, Bing isn't amazing, but they are there. So I think I understand why they're going after. I think that may be the wrong company to look after, because I think there are some other companies that may have a stronger hold on the market, even more so than Google, but it'll play out. I think it'll go away. But it's much different than 1999 or 2000 when Microsoft was truly dominant and there was no other players there to even compete with Google or Microsoft, excuse me.
Now, just a look on the antitrust. Now, my understanding is that the reason why they were going after Google was because that when you put in certain searches, they would pretty much filter it where it goes into their odds are versus the actual data that you're looking for.
But if we are going to be very honest, that happens across all platforms. Maybe.
And let's be very clear about the algorithm. The algorithm is basically informed by the choices you make in your own individual searches.
Wikipedia may be the only platform that if 1,000 people search for one term, we all would get the same result. Instagram, Facebook, Netflix, Hulu, they all tailor the algorithm to get us to stay in that matrix longer. So true, but also they are catering to their audience and they are an advertising platform. So if you're in Topeka, Kansas, your results may be different than if you're in Parsippany, New Jersey. Right. And I think I wish that was level, but that's the nature of business and advertising. You want to cater some of those keywords based on what the demographics are.
So then that's where most of the suit is coming from, because most of these states, like Arkansas is one of the states who was filing suit, because they were saying that when people in the market was searching for the best of, their product was not even showing up, even in that algorithm for that particular location. It was still bringing in some widget from somewhere else.
It's tough. They're going to make some changes.
Make some changes. In the meantime, clear your cache and turn off your location services, and it'll give you a more generic response.
I mean, then also you can use like DuckDuckGo, but it's not as popular. I know people who use Bing, they're like, I don't even get the best 20 results on Bing.
Right.
So that's one of the toughest parts. And then even with Yelp, even though it's not as popular as it used to be, that's skewed. Amazon review. I love Amazon. The reviews are not always the best. Some are paid for. So that's an issue that all tech companies, and anytime you are monetizing reviews or links, it's really tough for it to be a pure answer.
Authenticated, yeah. So before we get too deep, what's the assignment?
I want you to Google and research the 3 companies that have the least likelihood of being broken up by the government. Because everyone is saying Facebook is going to get broken up, Google is going to get broken up. I think there's maybe less than a 20% chance they split Google up. And then Amazon. I know everyone is wondering if AWS is going to get spun off, but I want you to Google which companies have the least probability of getting spun off, because then you'll also know for next year and the next 4 or 5 years some potential investment opportunities as well.
And it's also how independent is that to who wins on November 3rd?
It's going to be uniform. Like, to be honest, the companies that are doing well now, they're going to do well whether Trump is in office or Biden. It's very few companies that they may have 1,000% boom or 500% boom with either candidate in place.
Well, President Trump has personal animus to Amazon, to Jeff Bezos. So is he more likely to push for the breakup?
I mean, but okay, so let's say, and that does happen, and Amazon splits from AWS. AWS will still be a powerhouse. And then Amazon strategically needs to acquire more retail stores. Now, they don't have to be retail facing like Target, but there is a benefit because Best Buy has done better on a digital side and in-store delivery. Target has as well. So it's not only just being online, but online plus physical location. And if they can acquire some of those properties at a good price, which they have with Whole Foods, and they some other distribution centers, I think they'll be fine. Amazon isn't going to go. I'm not betting against Bezos under any circumstance. Unless God comes back and is like, hey, it's over. I'm betting against him for the next 10 years. So
what do you think about the new iPhone 12 coming out? How is it going to impact?
I really want Apple. And if any of you guys are watching, know anybody at Apple, they need to bring Johnny Ive back. I think they lost their innovation and part of their soul when he left. There's been a lot of tension between the old management team when Steve ran it versus what Tim is. And I think Tim is a great operational CEO, but some of the creativity has left. I think the phone would be great, the camera would be great, but we need more innovation than what we've been given. But the numbers would be fantastic, as usual. But they need some extreme innovation at Apple very soon.
And their cash position continues to position them in a way that differentiates them from everybody, I think.
I agree. I wish a couple years ago they would have bought Tesla, but now it's too pricey to do so. That would have been a great integration, but cash on hand always helps. That is a big moat that can keep a lot of enemies away, whether you need to acquire, do more research and development, and then, well, at some point, not this year, but I think we need to have a conversation about some of these technology companies maybe kicking in a little bit more, maybe over a 2-year period to help education, because I think if we put 2%, maybe even for 2 years, I think we can have high school start to develop kids to become developers inside of these companies, and then we wouldn't have to outsource as much to do so. But that's a whole another political can of worms as well.
Okay, Apple closed the day at $116.87, down 64 cents. So is that for those who are interested in tech and Apple? Is that is now one of the times that will they be considering starting in with some small investments, to incremental buys? Or
I can't tell anyone what to do, but at 100 or anything under 105 is good if you're looking for a 5 or 10 year period, because in maybe 18 to 24 months they'll be at the 140, 150 area. As long as revenue continues to grow, they'll be fine. Apple's not going anywhere. I know they aren't as amazing as they were maybe in 2009, 2010, but they're bringing in cash like.
And that depends on how you measure how great they are. Because to me, I would say their market cap is ridiculous.
Yes.
Cap position is ridiculous.
Yes.
The fact that they're going to sell more phones than you can imagine, regardless of the lack of innovation, is what matters to bean counters. And so I think forward facing, they're going to be, like you said, going to be fine. But am I as excited as I was when iPhone first hit the market with the new changes? No. I mean, I was more excited when they came out with the iMacs and had different colors than I am about this camera. Right?
That's true,
but and then
but iPad is doing well. The watch is doing great. AirPods is number 1 in the category. The Apple Card, I think, would be a pretty good success.
What about 5G? How will 5G impact this across?
I think 5G may be the most overhyped aspect of the market overall, because it's like, okay, if you have 5G, unless you're next to the tower, it's not going to have a great impact in 2021. Maybe in 3 years, it'll have a great effect. But in some major cities, it'll be okay. But it won't be the catalyst that everyone hopes that it will be. So. And until the economy smooths out, nothing is really going to drive us, because people are still reluctant to spend money. Now, once COVID is over, then we can stop with as much quantitative easing, and then people get comfortable, can go back to work, and life can go to normal. They may get to 200 in maybe a 5-year period, but until then, the market. But also, Apple is probably the first stock you need to look at every morning to tell where the overall market is going to go. So
what about the debt position in the United States? Our overall debt continues to grow at an astronomical rate.
I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah.
We've been pushing the snowball downhill for decades.
Uphill.
Yeah. So,
at some point, the chicken's got to come on the roost, right? At some point, or it's just because we got the biggest military that don't really matter.
You can only rob Peter to pay Paul for so long.
Right.
That's true.
It works until it doesn't. But if they're going to keep printing money, of course, the value of the dollar is going to, it's already at 90%, 7% less valuable than what it used to be. They'll run it to zero, and then they'll try and figure out something after that. But it seems like we are on a path for destruction when it comes to our debt.
I feel like there's no way out of it at this point. Like, how do you pay off, $30 trillion? Like,
mathematically, we may have to get a statistician on or a mathematics
yeah.
professor, but I don't see how that. I mean, states are in trouble.
Yeah.
I don't think this probably will be one of the greatest economic disasters in our lifetime for sure. Because we don't have a clue. Like, even with the recession in 2008, great, it was residential, a little bit of commercial. You had a timeline when that was going to end. People could still go to work. 400 was still packed. 285 was still packed in 2007, 2008. People can go to work. Gas was high as hell, but you can go to work. Now, it's tough. And from the people that I know that are working inside institutions, they're thinking this won't end to 2025.
Yeah, that's about right. It's going to shift because everything that we're used to, it's going to shift. As we kind of alluded to it last week, this is somewhat of the new norm. You're going to find more companies and organizations in this position here. It's going to be, as we stated, the corporations that still function in the old mindset mentality is going to be, it's going to be like a big ship trying to turn in a canal. They can't make the turn. And what's going to happen?
In last decade, in the 1920s, spawned some innovation as well. So there'll be a few players that come out of this recession better than ever. But I think Target has done a fantastic job. Walmart has innovated incredibly well. I think Walmart Plus will be a good competitor. We're going to see a few companies maybe in 4 or 5 years go out of business. But even Microsoft has told their employees, you guys can work from home now. Yeah. More cost efficient. I think from a cultural and maybe team morale standpoint, it's not the best thing, but it's cost efficient.
Yeah, it's cost efficient because it's too many companies. Because you have a whole generation of people in the workforce now that's used to working in a silo. They're used to having foosball and ping pong tables in a room, and they can work when they want to, opposed to the rigid mentality that most people are used to working, which makes it easier. Have you ever been into a Google building? I mean, everything is just laid back, but they get just very efficient.
A lot of companies have to adjust, switching from that factory or industrial mindset. Because I think as long as your metrics are met, that should be the only thing that really matters.
Exactly, that's all that matters.
Yeah, because any high stress environment, you have higher turnover, cost to acquire talent goes through the roof. So companies are going to have to just make an adjustment very soon.
I noticed
we got a few more minutes. A few more minutes left. Go ahead, Kevin.
Real quick, Walmart's co-aligning 200 stores, some brick and mortar to actually reflect their apps. And I think that's sort of forward-facing adjustments that they're having. What do you think about that?
I think people don't give Walmart enough credit for being like, I know it's an older story, and it's not as sexy as maybe Target and doesn't have the cachet of Apple. I think Walmart probably is 2020. They may have another 30, 40-year run before they start to decline. They have a very good team. They've adjusted very well. They acquired Jet a few years ago, spun that off. But I think with Walmart Plus to compete with Amazon, I think they're doing very well. Of course, there's a lot of improvements that they can make in store. The experience could be way better because that can bump up revenue maybe 5%. But Walmart is going to be here to stay.
We getting ready to wrap up shortly. But you have any books we need any reading material you want people to check out?
Yes, Too Big to Fail is one good one. It's a thick read, but history does tend to repeat itself. And I think in this era, going from maybe 2016 to 2019, a lot of companies got too comfortable and thought that market conditions were always going to be the same, that a disaster would not happen, and here we are. And a lot of companies are starting to be affected greatly. So Too Big to Fail is a great one. And then A Random Walk Down Wall Street, of course, is a classic. There's some good lessons and gems in there I think people can use that will greatly benefit them.
I just read Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Reginald Lewis. I just reread it.
That's a great book.
Fun reread. So
yeah, it's a great book.
Go back and read it. If you want inspiration, be able to do some things that are unexpected and still, deliver for yourself, a strategy for greatness, do that. And the last thing I would say is, if you haven't had a chance, go to YouTube and watch What's Your Life's Blueprint, Dr. King's speech, which is amazing and it's apropos to today's time.
That's amazing. And the great thing about the investment space, the players change, but the blueprint is the same. It's not like technology where strategy and tactics change every couple of years. Some of the things that happened in the 1960s and 70s are happening now, and the players will just change, but the strategy is like the same sectors are going to be popular for the next 10, 15 years. We are one of the content players, QB, they are starting to shut down. So we're going to see some triage, of course, in the space, but investing may be the only sector where if you look out 50 years, you can have a game plan for it and it'll work in 30 or 40 years. It does not change that much.
Besides the books, besides the homework of doing a search on Google, what should everyone be watching on the market this week?
Stick to business as usual. What I don't want to do is to turn us into a community of like traders or short-term investors that only think week to week. Long-term, everything is going to work out. Like, I want you, please do this. Go read back in 2006 what they were saying about Apple. The headlines are going to read the same. No innovation. They won't grow. It's old. It's tired. If you look out, we all wished in 2005 and 2004 that we would have held Apple through today. Google, same thing. The antitrust thing has come up before. So the great companies are going to remain great. Same like with LeBron. It was like, oh, he was a wash king, and now he has his fourth, and he's like, can he become the GOAT? So the narrative changes based on what the outcome is going to be. Been saying the same thing about Netflix when it was the DVD model. It's not going to work. They changed, they innovated. Disney, same thing. So just look at the long-term horizon. And even when you refer to investing books, if they're classics, it'll give you like some timeless principles of what to do that are applicable to today that will actually make you money. So don't think about it week to week. I want you to look month to month on the shortest term horizon and year over year. You'll be a hell of a lot happier doing that. And go vote. Please go vote. Regardless of who wins, the market's going to be fine. Once we get stimulus passed, once we know who the president is going to be, it'll be smooth sailing. Election night would be rocky, but once we get to January, February, we'll be okay. We'll be okay.
My man, Mr. Ian Dunlap, Red Panda Academy. What's your social? Let everybody know how to follow you, to pick up daily and weekly tips from you.
You guys can check me out on Instagram at The Master Investor. You can just look up my name on Facebook, Ian Dunlap, or you can go to joinredpanda.com, and I'll be posting some exclusive tips in my stories tomorrow about GDP and how things is done. It's really fascinating. Like once you go back 100 years, there is literally a pattern that happens based on who's in office presidentially, and of course the senators. It gives you a playbook to follow step by step that is 80% accurate each time. So
outstanding. We appreciate you once again, Mr. Ian Dunlap. He comes on every week, 7:30 on Wednesdays. We talk about stocks, stock tips, basically educating our community on what we can and should be doing in the stock market. So stay tuned with us and join us again next week with Mr. Ian Dunlap. Till next week, Ian, we'll talk to you again. Appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you guys so much.
Yes, sir.
Have a good one.
All right, Kevin, we're getting ready to wrap this thing up. So I'm going to let you do the first half. Any closing remarks before you give the first phase of the first half of the close?
That's my favorite part. No closing remarks other than, I think it's really important that everybody go vote. November 3rd, vote early if you can. Don't be afraid of mailing ballots as long as you mail them immediately.
Yes.
If you haven't mailed, go vote. That's really, really super important. And remember, you don't have to be in the street, but you have to be in the struggle.
You messed up. You started laughing.
I know, man. I love it so much. I can't help it. Go ahead, Tina. You think about it.
Once again, we thank you for joining us on a seat at the table. We had a great show today. We brought on a couple of people. Up next, we have on the seat at the table, Nothing New Under the Sun with Miss Cora Masters Berry. She will be talking about tonight from Jim Crow to Black Votes Matter. So stay tuned. Do not leave this channel. They will be joining us momentarily. God is so in love with you. He's ready to wrap his loving arms around you. All you got to do is say yes. Until next week, we'll see you then.
All right, brother. Good to see you, man.
All right, Nuke. We talk later.
For sure.
Yo.